And welcome to On Coaching with Magness and Marcus. I am Steve Magness, the cross-country coach at the University of Houston, Deputy Director of High Performance West. And I'm joined by my good friend and colleague and partner in crime, John Marcus.
We're back, baby, to give the people what they want. What is it the people want, Steve?
You know, what do I want? I want health.
So do I. On lots
And
of
I want to make sure, almost ensure, my health is good. So how do we do that? Well, the sponsor of our podcast is Health IQ. What in the world is Health IQ for you guys who maybe haven't been listening? Well, they're this innovative company that takes healthy people and rewards them, right? If you're a runner, an athlete, a triathlete, a weightlifter, you know, even someone who eats a really good diet, you can either go on to their website and take a quiz or submit race results or, you know, link to your Strava account. And if you do that, you'll likely get some savings back. On average, 56% of people save between 4 and 44% when they're looking at health insurance with Health IQ. So we really suggest you guys take a look at it. Go to healthiq.com/oncoaching. You can find that link in the show notes at highperformancewest.com or scienceofrunning.com. Help us out and check it out, and you'll save yourself some on life insurance.
And after you get some savings, go to HPW or highperformancewest.com to the $100 tab, and we're giving away 2 $100 checks to 2 lucky listeners who simply sign up and let us know what their favorite podcast episode was. It's our way to create a contribution and give back. We're very lucky and privileged to have a sponsor. And it's because of you guys. Those who have been listening since day one. Those who are listening today, and today is their day one. We want to make sure we're continuing this positive cognition of generous contribution. And that's how we're going to do it. On top of it, we'll give you an extra $100. That's right. So you get $100 for your own pocket. And then we're going to give you another $100 for you to pay it forward yourself. And that can go wherever you deem appropriate, as long as it is something that's generous and to some outfit, some person, some entity that needs it and that could benefit greatly for it. You know, it could be a track team, it could be a humane society, it could be whatever it is. Like, you know, we're not picky, we just want to see it paid forward because, again, that's what Steve and I and High Performance West is about. Making a contribution. So go to highperformancewest.com. The $100 tab will be there. It's a quick form. It takes 30 seconds to fill out. And then we'll pick and announce the winner at the end of May.
All right. Now that we've gotten some life, what are we talking about today? Well, you know.
Taking it easy, man. I'm taking it easy.
It's all easy.
Sometimes you need to take it easy.
That's right. It's a recovery day. As the great equation goes. Stress plus rest equals growth.
Oh, my goodness.
From some book.
Yes, a former sponsor of this podcast. Who needs that book anymore?
That's right. Not important. So we're going to talk about easy days, your recovery runs, your easy distance run, your just, hey, go out and get some miles run. And this was actually a listener request, so thanks a lot for sending that in. It gives us some ideas and lets us know what you want to hear from. So
yeah, we've touched on this before in many tangents, or even, you know, kind of more myopically in rest and recovery between sets of reps within a workout specifically. But here, you know, we're going to delve into the purpose of global recovery, the purpose of taking it easy, or in terms of not ratcheting up the intensity, or having to bring your A plus game every single day. And I think sometimes we forget that there's a polarity, there's a rhythm, a pulse, right, to training, and we have to be really respectful of it. And, you know, Bowerman famously had the hard, easy approach, and that's where a lot of our current culture stems from, is this 1 day on, 1 day off, or 1 day of intense work and 2 days off. But, you know, the thing is, there's no actually perfect magic recipe. You have to take it almost day by day with each individual athlete to really get the best bang for your buck.
Yeah, and I think that's the important part is that, when we look at this stuff, there's different recoveries for every different stimulus, right? So, sometimes you're going to need 1 day in between, sometimes 2, sometimes 3.
Right.
Sometimes you might take an easy 2 weeks, right? Just say, hey, looking a little fried, let's go back to the basics. Like, just ratchet down the intensity. And I think that's where, that rhythm aspect of coaching comes into play a little bit is, I know what maybe the scientific answer is or the periodization answer is, but it's really sitting there and looking at your athletes and deciding like, hey, all right.
Well, the theoretical answer, right? We have these nice niche charts and it's done in a lab and we say, okay, after a max velocity sprint session, you need to take, the 30 to 40 hours, or after lactate threshold workout, you need to take 24 hours. Sometimes that's the minimum required dosage, but those guidelines are just meant to be from a space to steer your thought and then to be able to think crisper and clear about really, okay, what is the intermediate impact and effect I want, and we're trying to get out of the athlete. And then also globally, how does that sync up with everything that's in the training program or the cycle or that block of training, always coming before it as well as coming after. Because we have to remember, in truth, training and planning is a hypothesis, right? And we're just basically making our best guess and we're experimenting and we're always discovering in real time. And so when we understand that training and planning for training is really just our best hypothesis, it's just an educated guess, then that gives us permission sometimes to be able to listen a little bit more closely, intently, in the moment, rather than be very worried that we're going to miss a stimulus or we're not going to get the full potency of the stimulus or the full effect of that type of work if we don't do XYZ perfect recovery down to the minute.
Right. And I think a lot of times one of the themes of this podcast is don't just check boxes, right? And it's easy in this sense to just check your easy day boxes, right? Be like, oh man, we worked out on the track on Monday, so we need to check 2 easy day boxes afterwards. Why? Because that's what our theory says, right? And I think what we'd encourage you to do is kind of get out of that mindset a little bit. Actually, a story on that. I remember 4 or 5 years ago talking to a coach from a different country, and we were sitting there, and he was, all right, what's your Monday look like? And I'm like, well, I don't know, right? What's your Tuesday look like? Well, I don't know. And he's sitting there, well, I know, like Monday, intervals, Wednesday, tempo, Friday, hills, Saturday, long run. And I'm like, for all the time?
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, like that's the week. That's the schedule. We change the workouts up, but like that's the emphasis schedule. And I think when we get caught up in doing that, like, yeah, maybe for the average athlete or maybe for, our average individual that we're talking about, that schedule holds true. But I think what it does is it misses that rhythm, right? And when I'm looking at scheduling workouts, instead of looking at that kind of weekly pattern or that 2 weekly pattern, I look at, okay, how recovered do I want this athlete after this workout, right? And then how long does it take him to bounce back, him or her to bounce back to that level, right? So you have to identify what the stress is of the workout you have, right, on, let's say, that Monday. And then you're trying to say, okay, before we hit it again with something else, something different, like how long does he need to bounce back from that? And maybe, the next workout is just some rhythm 200s or some hill sprints, and it doesn't take that long to bounce back. And I see that and say, all right, maybe 1 day or 1.5 days, right? Or maybe I'm coming with some really hard, intense 400s. Well, I might need 2 to 3 days after, right? So you're looking at this kind of global view and letting that stress and recovery requirements for that individual kind of dictate the days between.
And you have to include the athlete in the dialogue, right? So if you're doing a very difficult training session, and this can be for the runner, this can be the strength and conditioning coach, it can be for anyone. If you're doing a difficult training session that is a high neural load, a high cognitive load, a high fatigue load, whatever it might be, and you're saying, okay, today's emphasis or the theme of today is this type of work. This is what is probably going to happen. This is probably, the skill that we want to work on. This is the relative perceived effort or perceived level of intensity you want to engage in. And then it's probably going to take you about these many days, 2, 3, 4 days, to feel rejuvenated, to feel restored, right? To regenerate somewhat. And if by that third or fourth day, you're not at that certain percent threshold or that certain gas tank filled up to a certain the degree we want, we'll take another day. Now, it's very easy to get caught up in the numbers games and just default to things like HRV or different other very clear markers, right? Or say, well, on your easy days, you're going to run XYZ pace for your run, right? You have to run you can take a VO2 max test and they'll say your, easy day, your recovery day needs to be at these pace ranges, right? And they'll give you this very narrow tolerance. And I see the science guy here shaking his head, so I'm going to let him jump in because I can go off on my philosophy tangent, but I'll let him rant.
Okay.
I love me a Magness rant.
So, when I look at that, all right, so you do these tests, right? And you can even look at it from a heart rate zone standpoint. Mm-hmm. It's like no faster than this, right? The range is 640 to 7-minute pace, or the heart rate is 120 to 135, right? It's a very narrow range, mm-hmm. right? And whenever I see very strict prescriptions like that, I step back and ask, how in the world did they get to that point, and does it have justification? What are the assumptions to get there? And I think if you look at the research behind running easy, there's very little to decide, what is the best state, because there's so many different variables you're looking at, right? I think it's almost being a little arrogant thinking that we can tell to that degree on a cellular level how every individual is going to adapt, because we know we can't, right? It doesn't happen. And I think the other thing that really irks me about doing that is you're saying that, hey, I know where the zone is.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I know where the zone is. And if you go 5 seconds per mile over the zone, oh man, all bets are off.
Yes.
Like, you just wasted and you went into another zone and now we're not actually recovering. No offense, but the body doesn't work that way, right? If I go out for a walk, right, when I start my walk, my body might just activate all energy systems until it figures out I was like, oh no, Steve's just walking because his calf's hurt and he can't run at all. So we're good here, right? And and that's where it's kind of annoying. And if you look at how the body works, it doesn't hit just steady states, right? It's this constant, I wish you guys could see me, but this constant up and down, yo-yoing almost around this line, right?
It's undulation.
Yeah, exactly. It's just this nice undulation.
It's seductive though, right? The zones and prescription of a zone is a very seductive narrative. It gives us this illusion of control. It's kind of like when we go to the track practice and we say, okay, guys, gals, today we're going to run 800s at exactly this pace, because running 800s at 230 versus running 800s at 234 creates a different stimulus. And I always, find it difficult with athletes who want that exact number of, tell me exactly what to do today, and with keen precision. And I respect the place it's coming from, this desire to execute, this desire to be held to a high standard of account. However, we have to understand the tolerance. And this idea of tolerance, it's about spec, right? It's quality control. And so you can have a narrow tolerance, which is, say, this pace zone or this heart rate zone, and no over, no under. And the idea is to try to guide the athlete and teach them so they can stand on their own 2 feet. But again, the whole point of these disciplines is to internalize what those zones feel like in a normal state or in a state that is somewhat familiar. It's when you grossly step outside those zones, that there's trouble. So, if the tolerance doesn't need to be super narrow, but there does have to be some moderation there, right? You can't say, okay, guys, easy run today, and then what typically happens, especially in a scholastic setting, right? Someone didn't have the workout, or they struggled on the workout the previous day, whether it's mile repeats for your distance runner, or 200s for your 800-meter runner, and then they get frustrated, they get upset, and they feel like they need to prove their worth, prove their merit. Hey, I'm still good, so I have a great idea. I'm going to go as hard as I can on this quote-unquote recovery day. And then everyone else who play within the constraints of what coach asked is looking at, Jill, and Jill, she's just hammering along, and, people not wanting to lose face start to second guess themselves, like, oh, well, I should keep up with Jill, because if I'm not with Jill on the recovery day, what happens, right? And so it starts to escalate, and it starts to create this snowball effect that then you get to overrunning the regenerative recovery restorative day. But I think as a coach, it's important to highly emphasize the purpose of the busy, right? What's it for? What's the day for? You at the start of practice, I ideally like to say, here is the training menu. Here are the things we're going to do. The reason we're doing it is ABC. And what you should feel, and what you should feel during, what you should feel immediately after, and what this is designed to do to help aid and be a catalyst for is XYZ. And it takes 10 seconds. It takes 15 seconds just as a reminder. And it might be more for the coach than the athlete. But then when the athlete comes to you sick, hurt, tired, not because they were non-compliant with rest or non-compliant with the workout prescriptions and the hard stuff, the fun stuff, right? But they were non-compliant with the regenerative stuff, doing it far beyond the threshold, too aggressive, then that's a teachable moment, right? And that's what we're really searching for is, are you trained to win or are you trained to learn? And I always search for the teachable moment, because when you've empowered that person with that knowledge, they internalize it and they say, oh, I tried it one way and it didn't work. And I remind people, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you're getting. So if you're not satisfied or you don't like the outcome that has transpired, you need to create a subtle tweak, a subtle shift, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, when you come back to it, summarizing that a little bit is our pacing side of things is like, you need to understand the feeling and the purpose. And if you understand the feeling and the purpose, then the rest of it takes care of itself, right? And it's not to constrain. You're allowing the individual to understand why he's doing what he's doing so that, he can find the right thing. And I think as a coach, too, the other part of it is there's a large degree or a large understanding or want, I should say, to have some sort of control. And on our workout days, we have control because we tell athletes exactly what to do, right? But on our recovery days or our easy days in between, like, we relinquish a lot of that control. Not in every system, right? Not in the systems that constrain or say, hey, you got to run 6-minute pace or faster on this, right? That's a constraining system, because that is sending the message that I don't care how you feel after the workout. Like, I don't feel what your inner cues are telling you.
Right.
Like, you need to do this because I think this is the way to do it. So I think as coaches, like, we need to step back and look at easy days as sending the right message so that our athletes understand what in the world is the purpose of that. Yeah. And that's on both that's both sides too, right? If you see someone who's running, some male who's running 9-minute pace every day, and you say, hey, like, this isn't accomplishing what I want.
Right.
Then your purpose is to go in there and say, hey, I know you really want to recover so that you can, like, nail everything, but, like, this is excessive, and this is setting you back in A, B, C, D ways.
Yeah, and naturally, right, as the organism, as the athlete gets more fit, the pace, if you're worried about the pace, goes down of the regenerative and the easy day. But the thing is, right, if you do the heart rate and you use that biomarker, then the heart rate maintains the same. It doesn't spike. And that's really what you're looking for, right? Is on the regenerative days is not creating this sharp spike in the heart rate, not this sharp spike in your internal systems, whether it's be metabolic, bioenergetic, neuromuscular, all of them combined, right? And saying, okay, we just want a flush. We just want to kind of raise the core temperature, elevate, the organism, elevate the ability to secrete different hormones and excrete different toxins, whether through sweat, whether through the gaseous exchange through breathing in and out, or even just getting it other ways to the body, right? So understanding that, then it makes it a activity and a purposeful activity. People look at training runs sometimes, and they are training runs as junk miles, or as I got to get 50 minutes done, and I start and I get it done. There's other things that can be worked on during that training run, right? It's called a training run for a reason. And if you say, well, we're training your body's ability to regenerate, we're training your body's ability to restore, we're training your, arm carriage, we're training your breathing, we're training you just to have a good time. Like whatever it is, it's instilled that there's a purpose to the activity. But when, you just say, well, it has to be like this because I said so, or it has to be like this, or else if you don't, everything's going to come crashing down from this carefully prescribed training plan that I've created. I think you're infusing the athlete inherently with insecurity and inherently with some questions. I know coaches, though, that take it even more casual, that very effectively say, hey, the purpose, okay, you guys run as much, as little as you want within this wide tolerance, 6 to 15 miles today. But you need to be ready for this workout in 2 days. You need to be ready. What does ready look like? Ready looks like boom, 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 and clearly outline what ready looks like. So experiment with your own, capacity, like in making sure you have a very good handle on what you're doing the 21 hours away from practice, as Steve and I discussed in a podcast many years ago. But if you say you got to be ready and then they're not ready, again, what that opens up is for a teachable moment. And failure is important. Failure matters. You have to give the athlete space to fail, because it's how people deal with adversity. That's a really curious thing and tells a lot about the constitution of who you're working with. But if you just always are prescribing everything just perfect, and you're manicuring the path and you're sweeping the road for them at all steps of the way, when they do run into a failure, when they do run into adversity, when they do run into something that is going to have them have to think and improv on the fly because it's not within the highly scheduled and detailed race plan, you're ultimately doing the athlete a disservice. So again, it's checking the tolerance, right? You don't want to be excessive in any way. It's kind of the Goldilocks principle. Not too hot, not too cold, just right. But what's just right? So Steve, if you want to maybe go through this just right concept for an athlete after different types of stimulus, what globally is the framework of that, and then where do you springboard to based off the external or communication markers that the athletes give to you? I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, that's interesting and big ask there.
I know. I asked you because you're the smart one here, right?
I don't know like that.
You wrote in 2 books.
Yeah.
Well, at least start us off, and then we can go on a tangent.
I look at it as, so here's how I see it, right? Is we tend to classify things as easy, right? But there's all these shades of it, right? There's everything from recovery all the way to easy to kind of moderate to kind of like up tempo or progressions where you're not really a hard workout. So there's all these nuances, and I think it's important. So the way I look at it first is I sit there and say, all right, like, how recovered am I trying to get these people like physiologically, right? And that means like, how much do I want to add zero stress, almost like as little stress more as I can to it? Then the emphasis is on, hey guys, like, just go easy how you feel. Like, go jog around if you feel like hold good mechanics, all that stuff, but just enjoy each other's conversation and have a good time, right? And that's where I'm just looking for, all right, this is solely recovery, man. Like, for instance, with a lot of my college athletes, we do long runs on Saturday and then hard workouts on Monday. So Sunday is, for those who run Sunday, is just, hey, like, go run 5, 6, 7, 8 miles, like, pick it, keep it easy. You want to go 7:30 pace? Go 7:30 pace. Yep. I don't care.
Right.
Do it as a group. So that's kind of step one. And then as you move up it, I'm looking at, all right, am I trying to get some sort of like general stimulus out of it, right? Am I trying to maybe, keep developing that aerobic foundation? Am I trying to get some sort of time on your feet, pounding, body, bones, ligaments, tendons, all that adapted to it. Then I look at, okay, is that the key? Then I look at, okay, in order to get those adaptations, there's probably a relative length requirement I want to be in, right? So a lot of times I look at things as I get up into that 45, 60 minute range, right? Versus, maybe a recovery 30 minutes or something like that. So I look at that. All right, that's my next one, right? And then from there I look at, all right, this is beyond just kind of easy distance day, and this is where I'm looking for like a moderate stimulus. And that could be turning a run into a medium long run, right? Going from an hour to maybe, 75 to 90 minutes, depending on the athlete. That's kind of a moderate stimulus on the volume, again, depending on the athlete and where they're coming from or what they're training for. Or I might look at it as like a moderate aerobic stimulus and say, hey guys, let's just keep this one crisp. Right. And maybe, for your standard college guy, go hang out in the low sixes, right? Or another thing that I'll do sometimes is say, hey, last couple miles, just run to the barn, right? And that could mean dropping it down to 550, 540, right? For your standard kind of college high 14.
I love it. Run to the barn. Is that like a Texas thing?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love it. Run to the barn.
Run to the barn.
I love it.
That's why, I learned that from Coach Mike Deldano as a 15-year-old high school run. He said, hey, this is a run to the barn. And, for us, on that, we had this out and back, and it was like, hey, you're going to go, I don't know, at that time, maybe 3 miles out. And then you come back, and he says, hey, just run to the barn. And it's like, what does that mean? It's like, well, as you get to see the barn, you're going to run faster, right?
Yeah.
And that's what it is, right? Yeah. You start off, and you're still far away where you don't push enough, and then, you start to see it in the distance, and you just kind of pick it up, right? So you're getting a little aerobic stimulus out of that. Or in another way, if I want, some sort of, maybe to get some, maybe the recovery is in terms of a muscular one where I'm saying, hey, I don't want just easy. I want you to get a little bit primed for this session, right? It's still not a big stimulus, but I might add in some surges or some easy 200s or 150s or 100s to finish.
Yeah.
Or maybe even for a really advanced athlete, a couple excels just to get them popping and going. And I think you look at all these different, and that's, a quick hit on my spectrum of from pure recovery to getting some sort of stimulus out of it. And, everyone's is going to differ, but I think it comes down to what am I trying to accomplish in that day?
Yeah, so I look at it from this point of view. So we have today, and I'm always considering very sharply what we did yesterday or what the athlete did yesterday from not only a training standpoint, in a work demand standpoint, but also too, how was their day yesterday, after practice, before practice? Are they stressed out? Did they not get a lot of sleep? Did they, have a birthday party with their girlfriend or boyfriend, whatever? And then also what is coming up tomorrow? So when you are looking with one eye in the rearview mirror and one eye in the windshield, but being firmly rooted in the present, that can better inform how to approach today's task. And the day's task is a regenerative day. The day's task is to replenish, refuel. I always like to use the gas tank analogy because I feel like that makes a lot of easy sense to an athlete. And if the goal of the day is to say, hey guys and gals, tomorrow you should feel like you're at 75, 3/4 tank full. Tomorrow you should feel like you're at, near full, right? Or today you should show up and you should be about half full, or you should be a quarter empty. And that's an ongoing discussion and dialogue that you need to have with an athlete. And you can pick your different lexicon and, verbiage and own code that you discuss. But as long as people know the language and you guys are clear on the definitions of what that means, that will be a benefit. And two, this is where you also have to ask the athletes as well, perceptively after a workout, hey, how much did that drain you? As in a gas tank and or a battery, right? So you might have thought this tempo run was going to be light and fluffy and wasn't going to drain them that much, and it wasn't going to be a big deal, and you kind of can get away with a 1-day recovery before, coming back and doing some hard quarters or 300s, right? But the athlete says, oh, coach, that just, man, I feel exhausted. I'm drained. You have to tether with the age of the athlete you're working with. Are they trying to get out of the work? If they're a little bit younger and a little bit more, not committed, or, hopefully you're working with athletes who are on the same page as you and are striving and training to become the best they can be. And so when they tell you that, that's a red flag. Okay. I got to really watch them now the next 24 hours. And I'm going to really counsel them to take the best care of themselves possibly. I'm going to say, hey, don't forget to get in some good macronutrients with proteins, fibers, carbs and fats. Nourish your body completely. Make sure you go to bed at a reasonable hour, or at least sit there. Maintain low stress levels, right? We know the number one performance enhancing drug that's legal is sleep. The more sleep, sometimes the better, especially for the athlete. I like to repeat my favorite Plato quote, which is the athlete is a sleepy beast. And this is true. It requires a lot of work to be able to run or, throw or jump or do whatever you're asking the athletes to do at the intensities and the high level competitiveness we have today. And so that's met with a high degree of rest and rejuvenation. And so again, this polarity is key. This polarity is the thing that we want. And what we've noticed from Steven Seller's work, as well as if you go back and look at history, is this high degree of polarity. One of my favorite things is, a classic Bowerman workout. Way back in the day, Wade Bell used to do. And it was, he basically tripled in one day on a Saturday and ran 25 miles in the triple. So I kid you not, he gets up in the morning, he does some strides or some speedier work in the morning. Noon, they come back and then they do kind of a fartlek with a tempo run. And then in the afternoon, they do a longer shakeout run. Something of that nature. I mean, if you had a college man do that today as a Saturday workout, it'd be blasphemy, right? But then what they do the next day, 2 miles, walk jog, legitimately walk jog, right? Because it demanded that high stimulus and that high workload that previous day demanded that type of polarized rejuvenation. And they wouldn't really get back to intense work until a day or two later, right? So you're seeing an extreme. But remember, Wade Bell was a very competitive Olympian back in the 60s for the University of Oregon, sub 4-minute miler and cinders, right? Yeah. I mean, I know Wade. I see him at the U of O track meets, and he is just one hard-ass, badass dude even to this day. I love him. He's great. But he had that posture about him. Why? Because he knew in the fall, every week, he'd be doing these 25-mile days. Didn't complain about it, didn't bat an eye, but Bowerman gave them the space to then say, all right, you've done this heavy work, now go away and take it real, real easy, right? And that's, I think, where we have to understand is context is key, and the good coach, the best coaches, are always keeping a pulse on it. Not, let me get the data report of their numbers today and what pace did they run, how many miles, what was their heart rate. Those tell a story, yes, but they're one part of the story, not the entire story.
100%. And I think, that's why we've talked about this a lot, but I think checking in with your athletes in terms of, with my college kids, I'm sitting there asking how they're doing, listening how they respond, seeing how they walk to practice. And obviously it's harder when you're doing it from afar and you have to elicit more of a trust for the athletes to figure out and understand that. But I think that's incredibly important. I think in tying that back to how hard or fast should these easy run days be, is I think understanding that pulse and also understand the power of going for an easy run for 45, 60 minutes, whatever, with your friends on trails in nature.
Yep.
There's a healing aspect of that, right? Mm-hmm. And we know that from, hundreds of years of riding, essentially, and bankruptcy, right? Everyone realizes it. And we also know it from recent studies that have shown that, just simply going for a walk, in nature will improve your mood, productivity, recovery, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Even looking at pictures of beautiful things actually does too, right? Because your mind's kind of primed for it. So that's another thing that I think is worth considering is, are you allowing headphones, right? In a group setting that discourages that communication.
Yeah,
connection,
I mean, that connection's
bonding.
key, especially in a scholastic or team setting. If you have beef or you have drama that are cliques, man, you need to call it out ASAP. I always try to call it out. Once I become aware of it as coach, I say, all right, time out, practice, squash the beef right now. We're not leaving. We're not moving until we squash the beef, because it's just unacceptable. Everyone's working really hard. Yes, they're competitive. Sorry, this is a quick tangent and rant, but you got to squash the beef. It's just not worth it, man. If you're on a team and representing either a school, representing a group, representing anything bigger than yourself, you can't, strive to the pinnacle of one's excellence, either individually or within group dynamics, if there's cliques, fashions, and beefs. You just have to be bold, blunt, and call it out as it is. Not this big, emotional thing, not this big who's right, who's wrong. This exists, this shouldn't exist. How do we make it not exist anymore in the next 10 minutes? It has to be instant. The cure is what you're after. Not, I'll think about no. Either you accept Johnny's apology or you don't. Either you get over it and you forgive them. Forgiveness, the most amazing tool in the world. It sets everyone free. It doesn't mean you condone the activity. It doesn't mean you bless the activity. It just says, hey, this, slight happened and I forgive you for it and let's move on.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. And I think, where were we going with that? Oh yeah, connection and communication.
There you go.
There you go. I know we were somewhere. I think that's the other part is also taking advantage of where you're running, right? People forget the environmental impact of things, right? If we're always constrained to a track, for example, or, take my high school career for example, we were constrained to running around our school campus.
Yeah.
Which at that time we found this meandering 1.5 mile loop around the high school and the junior high school, right? And it was god awful. Right?
Oh, yeah.
We were high mileage kids. Even during the school year, I was averaging 80 plus miles a year. And that was normal for us. So we were spending way too much time running in circles in a loop. So what's our coach do? Very intelligently, he says, you know what? I'm going to take time out of my day. I'm going to go get a school bus and we're going to drive to this park, 15 minutes away. And we're going to do that when we need to do that. Sometimes for hard workouts, sometimes just for easy days to get us out of this aspect.
Oh, yeah.
Because he knew that environment, the environment you're around, can either squash you or it can rejuvenate you.
Oh yeah,
right?
I learned this from Rob Conner at University of Portland. They thankfully in Portland we have the beautiful, majestic Forest Park that's, has 80 miles of crushed gravel or compact dirt trails available, single track and road width as well. And he every day, that's not a workout day, Rob loads the pilots along with Ian Soloff for the women into the vans and buses, spends 10 to 30 minutes driving to somewhere in the forest to drop the athletes off so the athletes on their rejuvenated run, on their non-workout days, can run the forest. You run the forest every single day as a pilot. When I became the distance coach at Portland State, just down the road, or the river there in Portland, but in the heart of downtown, in the heart of the concrete jungle, right? That attracts a very urban central and urban focused student athlete. I made the same commitment. Every day we got in the van, and every day that was not a track workout, we went to a park. We went to the forest park mostly. And I said, all right, guys and gals, run. Just enjoy it. This is... Leave all the worries and troubles and stresses you have behind about paying bills, about tests, about papers, about whatever, for an hour, for 2 hours. And the kids would always come back a little bit better off, a little bit more refreshed. Not perfectly, but a little bit better. And that's the restorative aspect, right? When I talk about restorative, we're not just talking about physiology. Did the tissues, did the cells, did the central nervous system, did those things get repaired? To adequate levels so that we can tear them down again with another hard work bout, but psychologically as well. Did you feel like rejuvenated? You're at ease. The parasympathetic system is now in domination rather than the sympathetic system, right? Where are you in that soothing, more, okay, normal? And we know this works, and you can, try anything you want. Stay up straight for 14 days. You can't. Like, you'll go insane, right? Try to stay up straight for, 30 hours. You'll feel awful. What is the cure? What's the medicine? The exact polar opposite of that. Sleeping for like 10 hours. Your body's not catching up. It's just like, man, you deprived it for so long. Its only way to combat lack of sleep is with lots of sleep, right? And this is the whole point, is saying, this idea that we can work out every day. We can work out every other day year round is foolhardy. Now, don't get me wrong. There are definitely phases where you get in very deep work cycles, very stout medium dig cycles, as I call them, where you are working out every other day for a condensed period of time. And that might be a week. It might be alternating 1 week on, 1 week off of that, and for only, a month or 6 weeks. But you do have to hit it hard relative, and the density, intensity does have to be there, but intelligently in times long before the competitive season, in times when you're trying to get this big stimulus, and you can take aggressive risks, and you can say, it's okay that we can take a week off now because you have a strained calf. It's okay that we can take 3 days off now because you're kind of sick. That's an educated, risk that you're taking. That is an intelligent bet. And 9 times out of 10, it won't go the way you want to go, but at least you have the buffers to afford the restoration when it happens. But don't get me wrong, Steve and I aren't just saying just run around easy all day and you'll get fit and you'll get more competitive and you'll get better. At certain times, you do have to press the envelope or run to the barn, as I've just learned. But at other times, it has to be met. It has to be the other side of it, the yin to the yang, needs to be this, emphasis on restoration.
Yeah, it's this nice little push and pull that happens, right? And I think if you visualize training in that sense, like when you make a big push, well, you're going to have a big pull back, right? Yep. And it's like how long that push is or how dense it is, just kind of up to you as the coach to figure out, and making sure you're not pushing so far over the cliff that you aren't strong enough to pull them back, right? And that's kind of how it goes. And this also applies to, like, on the global scale, right? What does your recovery after seasons look like, right? How do you make sure that someone gets mentally and physically refreshed so that they can start anew when they start over? I think you look at some of the greats who have lasted a really long time, like Bernard Lagat, who takes
famously a month off, absolutely nothing. Gains like 10 pounds. Does absolutely nothing. Like, I think it's like the entire month of either October or November. Famously. Every single year.
And he's not worried about detraining.
Yes.
Right? He's saying, I need this time to make sure that when I come back, I am refreshed, rejuvenated, to give my all for this.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and this, I call it, people call it the grind, but I call it crunch time. So yeah, there are crunch times, right? There are times when you do need to be out there about your hustle, grinding, whatever that consumer culture is about working hard. That does need to happen. Do not get me wrong. Everyone does work hard, but we don't have necessarily the same consumer culture or the same enthusiasm about resting well. In our, very productive Western mindset, it's deemed as being lazy. You're lazy if you take it easy, if you don't show up for work because you're sick. You're lazy if you sleep in because you pulled an all-nighter. You're lazy. There's all these reasons we can say, oh, you're lazy for this, you're lazy for that. And we have to remember that there's a purpose and time for the lazy if you're hyper-productive. And a workout is being hyper-productive. And so you've earned that ability to take it easy for a little while, to restore, regenerate. The best pros, right? You see some workouts or workouts of the day we've posted, and you're just like, well, that's insane. They're from, planet Mars. How do they run that fast? Well, come meet them on their non-workout day. You see, like that's the beauty of the Easy Run. Everyone can participate because they are purposefully exercising what Steven Seller calls intensity discipline and going very relaxed, far, far below their capacity, far below their threshold, because they're more concerned with restoration. I'll never forget, I was in Central Park running in college, and I happened upon Paul Turgot. And this was about a week before he won in dramatic fashion the New York City Marathon. And he was kind of like, one of the times I geeked out was Paul Turgot, no lie. He was legitimately going poly-poly, right? The Kenyan easy, 9-minute pace, getting zip passed by, just random fitness enthusiasts or runners through Central Park who had no idea who he was. And even I felt foolish because I had a recovery day too, or an easy day, or a restoration day, whatever you want to call it. And I came up on him and like blew the doors off of him. And this guy a week later won it, right? And I thought I couldn't even like go that easy. I turned around once I realized it was him, and I tried to jog with him, and it was painful to me how slow he was going. And this was my young college self just being full of, bravado and being so brash and be like, oh, well, that's college men. We run 6-minute pace for our easy days because that shows we're tough and in shape. And here, is Turgot going, 8 minutes, 8:30, just enjoying Central Park.
Gotta love it, man. I had a very similar experience on multiple occasions. One was in high school when I went to the pre-classic and dusted all these Kenyans on my my day before the race warm up and stuff. And I was like, I don't know what's going on here. Like, what is this? And as an 18-year-old clueless, I was like, all right, here it is. And the other thing, even when I had some knowledge and had some big things on that, I remember writing in like my notebook the first week I trained with Alan Webb.
Right.
I was like, well, I didn't get dusted. Like these easy runs were pretty easy, right? I mean, they weren't jogging around like no Kenyan style, but I was like, we were just talking. I mean, I didn't have any, reason to be fearful of being like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to go, kill it with Alan. And I think, that's a huge lesson to learn and understand, because it's a cultural thing. And especially in America, where the culture is one of those like, hey, to make it, you've got to put your head down and grind, right? And there's what we miss on that is there's a time and a place for that. Right. But it's not the all the time culture, because what happens is if you follow that, then you're likely going to burn out.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, without a doubt.
Horribly. So, we need to take that into consideration and realize that there's a time to do work and there's a time not to do work. And when the time is not to do work, that is your job. Right. If you are lucky to have that ability, your job is to recover so that the next time you can work really hard. And it's no different, if I'm sitting here writing a book, right? If I just said, you know what, I'm going to crank this thing out, the equivalent of doing a workout every day. I'm going to go all in, and I'm going to sit there, and for 6 hours, man, I'm just going to type. And, in 2 weeks, I'm going to have a book. It would be a god-awful book.
Yes, it would. It would be. It would.
Right?
It would be the sloppiest thing I've written.
Yes, and I've written some sloppy things, but, if you want it to be good, then you take the time, you say, hey, I'm fully energized. I'm going all in here.
Right.
And then you step away whew, I got to recover before I can do that again. Yeah. And if you do that enough, then you're left with this masterpiece of the book, or at least something seemingly intelligent that people like to enjoy to read that makes sense. And it's the same with your training, right?
Fundamentally, it's an insecurity issue. If you're too insecure about the effort or intensity that you ran on your, diligent or deliberate or workout day, if you're too insecure that that's not good enough, and now you need to supplement it with elevated or lack of restoration and rejuvenation and recovery, or, just having to maintain a higher level of integrity about how fast you're running on those non-workout days, you have to sit and ask yourself why. Why do I feel this insecurity? Why? Oh, I heard this runner runs their recovery runs at this pace and they're already fast. So in order to be as fast as them, I have to mimic them. So then now it's a mimicry. And what works for them might not work for you, and vice versa, right? And I remind athletes all the time and time again, especially younger athletes who are learning this lesson and learning how to polarize their efforts and understand the importance and purpose and the value, the immense value of the recovery day, of the restoration day, or days, plural, or periods, or stepping back from training because of illness or injury and saying, hey, don't worry, your body's this magic thing, it kind of heals itself. If we take good care of it and create the right conditions, a lot of stuff that you're dealing with will be will be healed by your body just doing what it does. That's the beauty of the thing. And what I remind them is this: don't rush the product. Don't rush the product. And the product on the recovery day is to get better by getting into a restorative and rejuvenative state. And the product of all the training and effort and energy is to be able to, internalize and assimilate the stimulus and create and elicit a response that then creates this adaptation that enhances, right? And that's the product. But if you rush the product by either being sloppy with your restorative days by running them too hard, and then you rush the product by then having to be sloppy with your workout days by not being able to run them fast or hard enough, and then you get caught in this vicious cycle where it's just it's kind of this awkward stimulus that's not really a stimulus, and it ends up creating a cascade of diminished returns.
I couldn't have said it better. I think that, you can't rush the product is a nice heuristic to remember. And I think the other thing that, if we could summarize this podcast really well on Easy Days is it's know what you're trying to create. Right. Mm-hmm. If you know what you're trying to create, then the rest kind of takes care of it itself. And, the one other thing that I'll say to individuals who might be obsessive on hitting the easy days at certain paces or zones is that right there requires not only physical energy, but mental energy spent worrying about if you're on the right pace, your right heart rate zone, or what will happen if you just go over. Let me tell you, there is no physiological thing that shifts where it's like, oh my gosh, I went 5 beats over my heart rate zone, now I'm anaerobic. Doesn't work like that. No. The body doesn't work like that. It's all shades of gray, right? Even so-called thresholds, they're all just shades of gray. Mm-hmm. So just kind of remember that when you're looking at your easy days and understand that they have a purpose. And you know what is great about easy days?
What's that?
They give you life.
Yes.
You know what else gives you life? Health IQ.
There you go.
So if you're in the need of life insurance, which is something that we all kind of neglect, much of our training stuff sometimes, check out healthiq.com/oncoaching. Check it out in the show notes. The show notes will be up on highperformancewest.com. So thanks again. Appreciate you guys listening. And
he's really good at that, guys. He's sold 2 books. He knows how to create those segues. So shout out to Steve Magness there, keeping the sponsors happy, and shout out to the people for keeping us happy, and shout out to y'all for giving us an opportunity to have sponsors. And of course, we're gonna give that money right back to you. Go to highperformancewest.com, click the $100 tab, sign up for your chance to win one of 2 $100 giveaways, and we'll give you an extra 100 bones for you to pay it forward and contribute however you deem fit.
We're just trying to keep everybody happy. Because if the world needs more happiness, and if everybody's happy, then we get to keep having these conversations, and we can keep putting them out. Do all that stuff we just said.
Please.